We're all human, yeah. We're all human. Why don't you love somebody?
Thank you for being here on this beautiful day for this solemn occasion. And on behalf of the Community Remembrance Project Coalition, also known as Pinellas Remembers, thank you for being here for this occasion. I am Danny White. I will be the moderator for the event today. And at this moment, I'd like to welcome Reverend Clarence Williams, Senior Pastor, Greater Mount Zion AME Church, St. Petersburg, for the invocation, please.
Good morning. Let us look to God. Father, we're thankful and grateful even for the dark moments in our lives, the dark moments in our history. Teach us now that they have value, that even the things that brought pain and suffering in our world should always be remembered, that we never make the mistake of melting down the last shackle, removing all of the pictures, of destroying all of Auschwitz, so that those cynical people will be able to speak as though nothing has ever happened. Help us take these relics, we pray, and remember the lives and the blood offered up for us. And believing, oh God, what they believe, that our country will be one that has its promises available to all. Bless this site. We pray, oh God, that you will bless those who have the foresight, the insight, and the understanding to help us recognize and admire the accomplishments of one who gave his life. Bless this city, bless our community, our state, our nation, our world. Thank you, Father. Thank you for the way that you've eradicated and stopped this virus. We pray your blessings down upon our citizens, that as we recover in health, that we will also recover in mind, word, and deed. Amen.
Yes, let us say amen. And now, Florida State Senator Darrell Roussan with a welcome message.
Good morning. I'm Darrell Roussan, District 19, State Senator, Tampa, St. Petersburg. How do you welcome people to the site of tragic horror? How do you welcome people to the site of a tragic murder? How do you welcome people to a stark example of man's inhumanity to man? You don't celebrate the killing. By your presence here today, you are speaking to and appeasing the soul of John Evans and so many like him. You are appeasing the soul of his bullet-ridden body, hanging and swaying to the cadence today of the apologetic. Welcome to the memorialization of what should never happen again.
Thank you, Senator Roussan. And now we're going to give John Evans a little bit of personality. We'll have Attorney Jacqueline Hubbard, followed by Reverend Pierre Williams to speak about Mr. Evans.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Speaking on behalf of John Evans and the other victims of lynching in Pinellas County does not bring me any joy. What does bring me joy, though, is the fact that so many of you have come to commemorate his family's loss. He died in a very horrible and brutal manner, mainly because he was accused of a crime that he said he did not commit. And in spite of denying his commission of the crime, he was drugged over here by a crowd and strung up to a light pole, not dissimilar from the light pole that you see there on the corner. Behind me, where you see the lynching memorial marker, is the site where John Evans was lynched and killed by a mob that is estimated to be more than 1,500 people. Let's make sure that his death and the death of approximately 6,400 other black men, women, and children who were lynched between the period of Reconstruction until the Civil Rights Movement in the early 50s, a period of over 80 years, let us bring something positive out of their deaths. First, by remembering that it happened. Two, by accepting the fact of it happening. Three, by agreeing that it will never happen again. African Americans like John Evans and the other lynching victims have suffered untold horror and brutality for over 405 years since they were brought here on a Dutch slave ship in 1619. So, the purpose for the memorial is not just to remember them, it is to spur us on to have a community-wide discussion on how we end the violence and how we come together in racial reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Hubbard. First, giving honor to God and salutations to our guests here. This lynching memorial forces all of us to confront our racist past and present. Deep in my heart, without a doubt, I know that my grandfather, Loomis Williams, is excited today because John Evans, his protege, is being recognized. This lynching happened, and now the public is fully aware of its significance. As a young lad with a stammering voice, I promised my father that I would never forget that this noble man, what he was to our family and to Methodist Town. He was a man who gave food to the poor, money to the poor, greetings to the poor. That is John Evans. The story of John Evans has forever been etched into my memory because we were taught that justice, real justice, was a natural part of our calling as African Americans. I thank each and every one of you who has assisted in bringing this day to pass. Peace and blessings be upon all of you.
Thank you, Attorney Hubbard and Reverend Pierre Williams. Now, the Honorable Mayor Rick Kreisman.
Good morning, everyone. Before I begin my remarks, I do want to recognize some elected officials who are here with us today from St. Petersburg City Council: Deborah Fix Sanders, Darden Rice, and Robert Blackman. Also representing Congressman Charlie Crist is Gershom Faulkner. Many of our city administrators and city staff are here with us today, but I do want to recognize a couple individuals in particular who helped make this memorial a reality: Derek Kilborn, Wayne Atherholt, and Nikki Gaskin-Capehart. So I want to start my comments by expressing my gratitude for the partners who recognize the importance, not just of this memorial we are set to unveil today, but also of the moment where we find ourselves as a city and as a nation. To the Equal Justice Initiative, the Foundation for a Healthy St. Petersburg, and the Raise Foundation, thank you all. I want to particularly thank my friends Gwendolyn Reese and Jacqueline Hubbard, the Pinellas Remembers Coalition co-chairs. My thanks, yeah, please, thank you. My thanks to you both for your vision, your dedication, and your leadership. None of us would be here today without you, and we are so grateful to you and everyone at the Coalition for your work. Now, as mayor, I spend a lot of time talking about building a city of opportunity where the sun shines on all of us. And we do a lot of that work with everyone who is here today. And creating not just that city, but the opportunity is incredibly exciting work. But the only successful way to imagine a bright future for everyone is to honor our past in a way that recognizes that our past was not always honorable. It is incumbent on us as city leaders to call out not just the injustices of today, but to recognize the horrors and injustices of the past as well. Racial terror has always been about ensuring white supremacy. I do not think I need to tell anyone here that the effects of this terror have reverberated through our nation and our politics as recently as this last presidential administration. And so, as leaders working together to build a city where there is opportunity for all, we must call out inequity, bigotry, hatred, and racism wherever we see it and whenever we see it. Before we can move forward, we must shine a light on the sins of our past. And together, our light is brighter than the shadows cast by hate. Together, we can begin to heal. And it starts on this somber day with this important memorial. So I thank you all again for being here today and for joining us in this work.
Thank you, Mayor Kreisman. Mr. Brian Auld, President, Tampa Bay Rays.
I knew none of this. I'd never heard of John Evans, never heard of Parker Watson. I'm embarrassed to say that until a few years ago, I didn't know there was anything more to the green benches than an homage to a senior community and the name of a local brewery. I know Tony Janis, I've heard of Perry Snell, I know about Al Lang. I know a lot about St. Petersburg, but I knew nothing about these lynchings. The history of racism in this nation has been whitewashed to so many of us, particularly those who look like me, who learned that the Civil War was really about states' rights, or that the Civil Rights Movement successfully instilled equity throughout the nation at the end of the 1960s, who've never had to reckon with the terror, the torture, and the murder that happened in this nation we all love. There's a famous quote about all evil needing to triumph is for good people to do nothing. But that quote is too generous for our history. These lynchings were not the work of a handful of evildoers. They were spurred on, encouraged, and witnessed by thousands. Many in the mob undoubtedly believing that they were right, confident in their superiority and supremacy. It's ugly, it's horrifying. It's terrifying to acknowledge the very worst of who we are and of what we are capable. But we cannot turn a blind eye We cannot sweep it under the rug. We can't ignore it. We can't just move on and leave it in the past. We've tried that. We know it doesn't work. We know it isn't working. The Equal Justice Initiative reminds us that we must learn from it. We must wrestle with it. We have to stare it in the eyes and take steps to ensure that it never happens again. We must be vigilant against any and all uprisings of similar expressions of hatred, of bigotry, and of supremacy. And we must apologize for it. We must reckon with it truly. White people did these things. America did this. Florida, Pinellas County, St. Petersburg did this. We did these things. We can't pretend they never happened, that it wasn't our country, our state, our city, our ancestors. We need to know, we must be reminded, and we must teach it to everyone. And we must take responsibility and hold ourselves to account. So it is with the deepest and sincerest of gratitude that I thank, on behalf of all the Rays and Rowdies, but also everyone in our community, the Equal Justice Initiative, Pinellas remembers all the community leaders here today and everyone for doing the hard work, the extraordinarily painful work of ensuring that all of our history is told, taught, and passed on for generations. Only then may we hope to do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Auld, for your truths. And now, from Foundation for a Healthy St. Petersburg, please welcome Mr. Randy Russell, President and CEO.
Good morning. I'd like to first thank Gwen Reese and Jacqueline Hubbard, who are the co-chairs of the Pinellas Remembers Project, and this particular community remembrance project itself. I'd like to start with a quote from Brian Stevenson, the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. The greatest evil of American slavery was not involuntary servitude, but rather the narrative of racial differences we created to legitimize slavery. Because we never dealt with that evil, slavery did not end in 1865, it just evolved. Mr. Evans was one of those many incidents, but today we honor the memory of his life at the hands of the white people who saw the world in just this way. The results of 400 years horrifically show white supremacy is still alive and beating in our society. White anti-racists have to act loud to stop violent acts of hatred still being perpetrated against blacks. May this moment remind Pinellas County residents and all of St. Petersburg we have a history we must know. And that history is also present in the now. And that history is part of our future. How we take this memorial, let it change us. Murder is a sin against God, a sin against our fellow man, and it is the lowest form of human behavior. And when targeted against people who are black, it is a form of genocide in America. That is not the freedom of our nation and the way we were founded. Let us be true anti-racists and defeat any acts of violence from white people to blacks. Let the memorial stand in that honor and memory of bringing the past to the present and changing us for the future. James Baldwin said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." This memorial today helps us bring the present and the past and the future all together to say never again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russell, very much. Deputy Mayor and City Administrator, Dr. Kanika Tomalin.
Good morning. Poetry is a gift especially prevalent in the African community. Ages old, it is a literary and storytelling device that has been used for centuries by people in Africa and their descendants across the world in ways that have helped to shape the narrative of the world, called by those ancestors and inspired by poets Amanda Gorman, who we've all come to love, and Audre Lorde, I have prepared today's remarks in iambic meter in gratitude for the healing to which we all lend our hearts and hands this day. See what here was done to me. As Lord commanded, there are questions, answers we each need to know, not call and response to others, but reflections to and from our own souls. And I'm not speaking of the Lord to whom so many of us rightfully worship and pray, but of Audre Lorde, the Harlem-born poet, feminist, author, and activist who offered that in questions we find our way. She posed, let's ask 4 questions to better know our truths. And today I ask you to answer them as an examination of our shared roots in this place and places like this all across this land where posts, gallows, and trees were used as public squares for the terrorizing destruction of man, where different roots had grown deep from a seed sown years, maybe centuries ago, to produce branches strong enough to support the weakest of society, a town's lynching, gathered crowds, a grotesque show. Truth is, the method varied for more than 6,000 souls from place to place in cities like our own, across 20 states. 6,000 men and at least 200 women treated as chattel, dragged to different destinations only to receive the same fate. Men like Mr. John Evans, who was hunted here, hung from a post, then riddled with bullets that caused his death. The crowd of more than 1,000 men, women, and children, satisfied by only his ceased breath. Ceased breath. For those 4,000, but death and terrorizing fear for countless more. These lynchings were a horrific warning scorched into the hearts of every Black family, nailed into the threshold of every Black door. Terrorism that silenced, punished, and prevented the freedom that had been promised but too long deferred. Instead, a refrain of Black people as it relates to your rights. Don't believe in the laws you read. Remember this law. Who you see hanging here, believe this terror that you heard. And know that the same waits for you if you try to change the way your existence is reduced to my pleasure over your life and that of your loved ones. I have all say. That is what happened at sites like this one, time and time again. It is a historical reference on whose respect, that of my people, on which my respect depends. As a collective, we must own that such atrocities were real, even here in our beloved Burg, our city of opportunity. There was a time, there was no place for overarching influence, inclusion, empowerment for people who look and live like me. So today, as we stand, see what here was done to me. And to all who share my heritage, we all hang from that metaphorical tree. And we all rise with the knowing of the truth and our collective commitment to right the wrongs. We all grow with the understanding that we sing different verses, but our harmony comes in a common song. I believe it to be those questions I mentioned earlier, Lord's questions. I'll offer each to you as a salve, a healing of inward reflection that helps us know what to say and how to do. How to acknowledge divinity in one another in ways our forefathers failed, so that we can allow our own blessed divinity that recast our truths to prevail. So crowd, these are the questions, Audre Lorde's questionnaire. Ask them of yourself every time you think of what happened here. Every time you think of the horror and this time of community healing too. Every time you think of what it means to me and what it means to you. Ask yourself, What are the words you do not have yet, or for what do you not have words? What are the ways language falls short of what you've seen and what you've heard? And what do you need to say? For all things necessary, make a list. Allow your heart to express its anger and frustration with the flow of all your triumphant soul consists. Next, what are the tyrannies you swallow day by day and attempt to make your own until you will sicken and one day of die? And will that death be shrouded in silence still? Truth untold is the same as a lie, and you can change the course of history, your history, with your truth. You need only your will. And finally, if we have been socialized to respect fear more than our own needs for language and definition, then let us ask ourselves this day, what's the worst that could happen to me if I tell this truth and allow that truth to guide our way? Today, St. Pete, we've told the truth. It guides our way. Thank you to all who have worked so hard to bring this important marker memorializing Mr. John Evans to our city. We are on our way to reconciliation that informs a more enlightened, equitable future. That acknowledgement, this moment, and our community's commitment to heal the fissures and fear that allow for such destruction of the human body and spirit in the first place helps to reveal our way forward. Our entire city is grateful for your wisdom, and we are made better by your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tomlin. That was outstanding, as usual. We appreciate that. And now we will have the actual unveiling of the marker. Andrew? Thank you, Andrew. We appreciate that. And again, thank you everyone for being here. And now, Dr. Alex Harris will serenade us.
Tell me what is the difference? Inside we're made the same. To love is simple. Yes, we can change. Mend our brokenness. Heal the world, disease and pain. Now tell me, will you turn and walk away and pretend you don't see? When I hear an outcry in the universe for all humanity, we're all human. We're all human. We're all human. Oh, yeah. I've been a victim of system, but I learned to play by the rules. I almost lost my identity by the isms abuse, said positions and powers, said so misused, generational ignorance. It's been told as truth, yeah. Now tell me, will you turn and walk away, pretend you don't see? I said there's an outcry in the universe for all humanity. We're all human, yeah. We're all human, yeah. We're all human. Ooh. Let me say this right here. Yes, inequalities, they still do exist, yeah. But a change will be if we dare persist, and if we don't stand for something, said we'll fall for anything, yeah. Come on, everybody here, come on, St. Peter. Stand for love, that's what we believe, yeah. Tell me, will you turn and walk away and pretend you don't see? I said I hear an outcry in the universe for all humanity. We're all human. We're all human. We're all human. I said we're all human. Oh, we're all human, yeah. We're all human. We're all human. Oh, we're all human, yeah. We're all human. We're all human, yeah. We're all human. Why don't you love somebody?
We are all indeed human. And now is Dr. Julie Armstrong. Where are you? You're right there. You're ready. She's going to read the narrative from the marker.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. The marker has two sides, and I am going to read the north-facing side first. The lynching of John Evans. Near this site, on November 12, 1914, a white mob lynched a black man named John Evans. During this era, black people were burdened by a presumption of guilt that made them vulnerable to mob violence and lynching. Mr. Evans arrived in St. Petersburg from Dunellen, Florida, and worked for a white man, Edward Sherman. When Mr. Sherman was later found dead and his wife was reportedly assaulted, suspicion was directed at Mr. Evans. Without formal charges, trial, or conviction of Mr. Evans, a white mob kidnapped him from a rooming house and tortured him in a wooded area before throwing him in the St. Petersburg jail. The mob later abducted Mr. Evans from the jail and hanged him from a light pole located at the border between the city's segregated and white communities, segregated black and white communities. This public spectacle lynching was attended by an estimated 1,500 men, women, and children. As Mr. Evans struggled to hold himself aloft, a white woman shot him from her car, inciting the crowd to fire upon him for more than 10 minutes. White mobs then terrorized the black community for days in search of an alleged accomplice, Ebenezer Tobin. At least 170 black residents fled their homes for safety. Mr. Tobin was later found and tried by an all-white jury, becoming the first person legally hanged in Pinellas County in October 1915. No one was held accountable for Mr. Evans' lynching due to the impunity granted by racial hierarchy in St. Petersburg. The south-facing side reads, Lynching in America. Thousands of African Americans were victims of lynching and racial terror in the United States between the Civil War and World War II. The lynching of African Americans during this era was a form of racial terrorism used to intimidate black people and enforce racial hierarchy and segregation. Lynching was most prevalent in the South. After the Civil War, violent resistance to equal rights for African Americans and an ideology of white supremacy led to fatal violence against black women, men, and children accused of violating social customs, engaging in interracial relationships, or crimes. Lynching became the most public and notorious form of racial terror and subordination directed at black people, and was frequently tolerated or even supported by law enforcement and elected officials. Though terror lynching generally took place in communities with functioning criminal justice systems, lynching victims were denied due process, often based on mere accusations, and pulled from jails or delivered to mobs by law officers legally required to protect them. Millions of African Americans fled the South to escape the climate of terror and trauma created by these acts of violence. Of the more than 316 documented racial terror lynchings that took place in Florida between 1877 and 1950, at least 3 took place in Pinellas County, including John Thomas on December 25, 1905, and Parker Watson on May 9, 1926. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Armstrong. Least I'd be remiss, we want to, on behalf of the coalition, to thank the U-Haul property for their accommodation for this event today. We appreciate that very much. Give the U-Haul people some. And all of the coalition members who are actually here present today. Where are you? Make some noise, coalition people. Yes, yes. All of this hard work to bring this memorial to fruition today. Thank you again for being here. And to close our ceremony today, again, Attorney Jacqueline Hubbard.
As we close today, let me say that I'm thankful to all of you, each and every one of you who came out today to participate in this ceremony. I'd like to thank the citizens of the South Side of St. Petersburg. I'd like to thank the citizens of all of St. Petersburg. And finally, I'd like to thank God for giving us the strength to carry on, to bring this memorial to fulfillment. Once again, thanks to all of you, and God bless all of you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our ceremony. Thank you. Be well and be blessed.
You know, it is very significant for me to be here at this lynching memorial. I think it's very important that we remember our history as a country, as a state, as a county, as a city. And while we all desire to continue to move forward, I think that the only way we move forward authentically is to understand from the place in which we've come, where we are, and the opportunities ahead. And this is the history that has not been told and included into our history books, and is something that we need to start sharing with our community, not just the generations of today, but the generations who were here before we, they're responsible for my being here. And so I think that while everyone is breathing this amazing air here in Great St. Petersburg, is to remember that the air and the energy that we breathe, it is because of what has happened, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'm very, very grateful that I was able to be a part of this lynching memorial today to honor the spirits of those who sacrificed their life and to make it better for someone like me and others.
Well, you certainly are a very, very talented young man.
Thank you very much.
And the music that you chose was just spectacular. Tell us a little bit about that project.
I wrote the song Humanity after the killing of George Floyd. It's a song that's on my new EP, Frequency, and it's all about raising frequencies of positivity to make our community, our world a better place. And it's a song that's very dear to me, is because regardless of the surface of who we are, it's about who we are underneath all of this skin. We all breathe the same air. We all have the same heart. We bleed, we laugh, we celebrate. Our emotions internally are definitely created from the same source. And so I think when we realize that we all are human, I am you, you are me, that will make our world in a better place as we propel forward.
What are you taking away from today?
I'm taking away today great inspiration, great hope that there is even better days ahead because there is a reckoning that has happened and there is an embrace for this to continue to be amplified, that our community does continue to become an even greater place to live, work, and play.
Final question. If people want to find out a little bit more about you and your music, how can they
Sure.
do that?
So people can find out about me directly from my website, alexharrisofficial.com. And you can also visit my foundation, the Arts Conservatory for Teens.org. Both the Arts Conservatory for Teens.org was started here on 22nd Street, which was at one time before 1965 the African Americans downtown because they couldn't cross Central. But we started there, and now we're serving underserved, underprivileged students all over the city and beyond, making it a better place for them to live, work, and play in the future.
Mr. Kirshner, we're here at this wonderful event today, a wonderful turnout, a beautiful day in St. Pete. What is the significance of this event as it pertains to bringing this attention to the public?
I just heard a conversation with Dr. Paul Farmer from Partners in Health that some of the viewers might know, and he says the price of admission of having connectivity and intimacy with anyone is understanding your history. And so I think, as Brian Auld, the president of the Rays and the Rowdies, said that he's been here for over a decade, never knew this history. And there is a lot of unfortunate history in all of our Florida communities throughout the South as it relates to lynching. And so this is a critically important, I think, moment to deepen our understanding collectively as a community of what that history entails and pay that price of admission.
Well, one of the key things that came across here is that it is important to remember, to make this a part of the fabric of our history. Why, being in education, being involved with Eckerd College, why is it important to get this information out, especially to young people, so they have a better understanding of a tragic history?
Yeah, just looking at it from the context of Eckerd College, and as a college that hopefully is informing our students, many of whom are pre-med, focused, that will go on to be doctors in our communities. And I say that specifically in the context of a pandemic, and how we see the pandemic really affecting and impacting African Americans and Latinos so much more than it is our Caucasian brothers and sisters. And so again, if you don't understand the history of where these things start and how that comes, downstream, then you're not really going to be that good of a doctor. You're not going to have that level of empathy required and understanding to get to root causes and hopefully, be a true companion in arriving at curing a patient, which also is a metaphor for hopefully healing our communities too. And so I think, projects like this, the marker, talking about it, having it present for our students, and part of this program, by the way, is a program in the school system with an essay contest as well. So it's a really integrated, thoughtful program that hopefully just doesn't end today with one ceremony, but how, as you say, we're talking about this always with our children, and it's part of the history that it might not be a glorious part of our history. It's something we might just assume forget, but it's really incumbent upon us to talk about it. In no way that if you walk throughout Berlin right now, it's very hard to walk on any street where you don't see memorial markers about a family that was ripped out of a house in Berlin and taken to a concentration camp. And I think it's long overdue in the United States that we understand our history and that we instill that in our children.
As you look around today, it's a great turnout for a great event, great speeches, very eloquent people that are talking. What do you think this means to the community, to the St. Pete community, to recognize the tragedy of lynching in America?
Yeah, well, first off, it was great turnout, but this was only by invitation because of COVID again. And I think if this were in the Tampa Bay Times and on METV with some advance notice, maybe we would have had to host this at Al Lang Stadium, because I think there's, after everything that took place this past summer and the conversation, that it seems like a lot more people are ready to talk about, well, what exactly is racial equity and why do these things keep happening, like what we saw this summer, and that tension and the frustration and rage in many communities across America. That's why today is important, that we don't get to those boiling points. We start understanding and unpacking and doing better from a healthcare perspective, from a criminal justice perspective, from an education perspective, and we start doing that, then hopefully what we saw last summer is something that one day we'll have memorial markers for that, and we're not seeing it again and again in the future.
Ms. Kirshner, the coalition, as they sponsored and organized this event, did a tremendous job. Tell us a little bit about the coalition and the work that you would like to see them do as you move forward.
All credit goes to Jackie Hubbard and Gwendolyn Reese, the co-chairs that hopefully you've interviewed. And it is an incredibly wide spectrum of the St. Pete Pinellas community, from higher education, attorneys in the legal field. I think there's a few doctors, a lot of retirees, but some young professionals that I want to say probably number 40 plus, and that I think helped build the momentum to make this happen. It's obviously in partnership with the Equal Justice Initiative out of Montgomery, Alabama, that we hope will soon see similar markers in Sarasota and Manatee counties that has their own history there as well, and that this is again infused in all of our lives and we understand it, and it's something that we can carry with us and know that we have to do better to build that just and equitable society that we've been talking about since 1776, but just in practice has never materialized.
And sir, if I could ask you, the African American community has been subjected to untold violence for generations. Slavery, brutality, lynchings, and most recently, the African American community has been subject to a rash of police brutality, police shootings. How does this tie together, and how does the community respond to that so they can move forward?
I think the community response probably starts with, again, for me, our white brothers and sisters. And again, I think that price of admission that I said earlier on really trying to have an understanding of how we got to where we are. Why do we have that the median income of an African American family of four is about 4 times less in the state of Florida than the median income of a family of four of white individuals? And that what I think the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative said, that was mentioned earlier in one of the talks, that the stain of slavery was not so much that we enslaved these people, but it was this narrative that somehow that by virtue of the color of your skin you were inferior. And unfortunately, as the speaker Randy Russell said, that continues. That is pervasive, and that is what is fundamentally our work and of this coalition, of having markers like this, and particularly the responsibility for all of us as white residents in the community, that I think people of good faith in a country founded in Judeo-Christian principles, we all have that obligation then to fight for that and elevate that space to one of equitable treatment of all, and why it's encouraging to see such a broad-based group that came together in this community to put this plaque up, and hopefully more than just perhaps the performative, but that we see this in practice in the work that we do in City Hall and in institutions of higher education, in the public school board, and on down the line. And I think that's the work that remains.
And sir, final question for you. You've just been such a committed individual, very articulate and very dedicated to underserved communities, the Hispanic communities through your work with Unidos Now, the African American community. What do you want people to take away from an event like this today? Not only the people that are here, but the people that may watch this in the future. What do you want them to take away?
I think, again, maybe going back to the summer, these are expressions of communities, and you saw expressions of extreme frustration over the summer that were in many ways spontaneous combustion. What you have here is an expression of a community that I think has percolated in probably a more thoughtful and intentional way that, again, gets to the root of those levels of frustration that I don't think anyone in this country wants to see. And how do we drive greater equity? How do we drive better conversations? And so this type of event and having these types of conversations does that.
A group of us have been working on this lynching memorial for over 4 years. We came together with Gwendolyn Reese and other community activists and formed the coalition on April 19th, 2019. We now have about 80 members of our coalition, and our goal was to engage in a community-wide effort to secure a lynching memorial. And where I'm standing right now is where John Evans was actually lynched, right in the same spot. So that's why we're putting the memorial here. This is where he was lynched.
Now, Jacqueline, if I may ask you, it looks like you have a great turnout. It's wonderful to be able to commemorate it. Why was it important for you and the coalition to come together to do a commemoration about lynching?
Well, first of all, to remind the citizens of St. Petersburg that the horrible lynchings, that did occur in St. Petersburg. And also to remind people that African Americans since 1619, we're talking maybe 405 years, have been subjected to just an inordinate amount of violence. The violence never seems to end. And during the period of time from Reconstruction until the Civil Rights Movement, the Equal Justice Initiative has indicated that it has located approximately 6,400 lynchings, most of which occurred in the southern states that seceded from the Union.
And if I may ask, what do you think about young people, school-age children, learning more about this history and the impact it made on our country?
Well, they have to know that the impact of free labor was a prime motivator for this country being as wealthy as it is. The other thing is, in spite of all of the horror and hardships such as lynchings, African Americans have made amazing and astounding contributions to this country in the areas of the arts, in the areas of music, in the areas of science, in the areas of writing, in spite of everything. And so you can't hide the past. You've got to come to grips with it, and you've got to be honest about it. And once you're honest about it and recognize that these things did actually happen, then the hope is that we will move toward racial reconciliation in this country. But you need to have truth in order to get there.
So this wonderful occasion that you're commemorating today, what do you want people to take away from today's event?
I want people to take away from today's event, just as I'm sure that the coalition itself wishes people to take away from the event, is to recognize the horror, to accept that it did in fact occur, and to move beyond it so that we can have peace and racial reconciliation in this country. And in order to have racial reconciliation, people have to understand the things that happened. We can't run away from our past. We have to move forward because we have to understand that the current racial violence is simply a continuation of the racial violence that existed before. Many of the early police departments were formed from people who were slave catchers. Everything is connected in this country. And so we have this pattern of abuse, which has to end. I'd like to mention the amount of service that my co-chair, Gwendolyn Reese, has contributed to this entire effort. She wasn't able to be here today, however. So I just want to give a shout out to her.
So Andrew, we're here on a beautiful day in St. Pete to commemorate lynching in America with this beautiful sign behind us. Why is it important for this community to recognize the tragedy of lynching?
Well, you know, it's honor, memory making, giving voice to John Evans and others whose voices were not documented, were not heard. Their story needs to be told.
Now here in St. Pete, as throughout the South, you know, it has to overcome a very racist history to do this. But as the turnout indicates today, you have a great number of people who are here to help in that remembrance. It's not a celebration, it's a remembrance of this. Why do you think this community is should be so engaged in this remembrance?
If we don't remember, it does a sort of dishonor. So for me, it's about honoring. And again, celebration is not quite the right word. It makes it conflictual and difficult to have a both and. It's a both and sort of thinking. And we need to celebrate, as I just slipped back into the word, the memory. It creates a different vision. Again, giving voice to somebody's tragedy who didn't get the chance to speak often. It gives sanctuary.
That's a wonderful point. That's very, very eloquent, Ruth. Why do you think it's important for young people, school-age people, to understand this past tragic history as they go through school?
The most obvious is because this part of history is not typically shared. And when kids are asked or say, I don't understand, why is this like this? This contributes to the narrative. It clarifies.
What would you like people to take away from the event today?
That more people need to join in and help with this cause. And every state in the United States, or every county in the United States, has a marker. And wherever you are, you can join in and support this. Go to the EJI webpage. Go to our webpage. Pinellas Remembers.
Final question for you, Andrew, if I may. The African American community has suffered so much violence through the ages. Slavery, beatings, lynchings. And as we move into the more recent history, there's been this outpouring of violence against Africans. Whether it's the Breonna Taylors or George Floyd or many other people. How does that all tie together for people to know how they can make a difference?
Well, this is a part of that connection, because this is seen more as historical, but it makes a connection with what's going on now. That violence has been used to intimidate, but still, we do this to remember that people overcame no matter what.
So Christina, here we are on a beautiful day in St. Pete. You're standing in front of this significant plaque that is commemorating lynching in America. Tell us a little bit about the coalition, your position with it, and why it's important to recognize this event.
So we are working in partnership with the Equal Justice Initiative. We're formed of several different groups in the community. Everybody's here to promote or to show the history of racial terror in our community. It's an important piece so we can learn it, and in order to heal from it, we have to confront those hard truths. And so everyone in the coalition has that passion of working towards that goal.
So Christine, tell us a little about the work, the level of effort that went into this, to reaching out to other organizations to make this event happen. And tell us about a little bit about the other organizations involved.
As far as this specific event or the coalition?
The whole coalition.
So a lot of people, it kind of came together organically. So a lot of people went to visit the Equal Justice Initiative's museum in Montgomery, Alabama, and after seeing their monuments there with Pinellas County and the 2 lynching victims on there, I think that inspired a lot of people to want to do more. I know that there were some groups that already intended on doing this work prior. The African American Heritage Association, and then ASALA and the St. Augustine's Episcopal Church. I know they took a trip to the museum.
Christina, you have a crowd that's gathering. It's going to start in a few minutes. What would you like people to take away from this event and from this plaque today?
I think it's important to learn our history. I think there's a lot of horrible things that we don't typically learn about in school. I think it's an important part of the healing process for us to confront that history. I hope that's something that people can take away from this marker.
Inside we're made the same. To love is simple. Yes, we can change. Mend our brokenness. Heal the world, disease and pain. Now tell me, will you turn and walk away and pretend you don't see? When I hear an outcry in the universe, for all humanity, we're all human. We're all human. Yeah. We're all human. Oh, yeah.